Hello everybody, this is Michelle Fox and welcome back to The Simple Quilter. Today I'm going to be talking about and showing you how to get flat seams when you quilt. Now this is being done at a subscriber request, so that's today's topic. Now the first tip I want to share with you is for flat seams is to press your seams well. Now I've known quilters who never ever press. Now they've made beautiful quilts. I don't know how flat they laid and all, but I press my seams and I press them flat. I use steam. Not everybody uses steam. That's a personal preference. And I also use a light starch alternative called Best Press. But I have made a video on how to press your seams, and I'll post that up above if you're interested in that. I'm not going to review all those tips for pressing well, but for flat seams, my number one tip is to press. The next thing is to use starch. I used Best Press. There's a couple of other that I use, but Best Press is my favorite. Now, some quilters use the Faultless Spray Starch, and they saturate their entire pieces of fabric prior to cutting it, so their fabric is almost like paper. Now I don't practice that, but I've seen that done a lot, and I have done that in the past. I took a class once that did that, and you do have very accurate seams, and it does aid in your seams being very flat. However, I don't prefer to pre-starch all my fabric before I use it. But again, that's just a personal preference, and that is one way you can get flatter seams. Now, another strategy for getting flat seams is to nest your seams. And all that means is that when you press fabric, you're going to press it all to the dark side. So if you're putting, say, two patches together to make a 4 patch, you're simply going to butt those seams up together so that when you open them, you're not laying on top of this fabric here. So each layer only has 3 seams there. So then when you sew it, it's gonna look like that, and you're going to have 4 layers there and 4 layers there. But you can see how nice it makes a point right there. So in this one, I have pressed the seam open, and it really is flat. Now this is how I typically do all of my quilts. In fact, I called the lady who quilts most of my quilts to ask her if she's ever had an issue with my intersections or even the pinwheels, and she said no. And so I really mainly just use pressing to get my seams flat. Now I know you can't feel the thickness, but this really is pretty nice and flat. It's not a great big bump there. Okay? Now another strategy is you can press your seams open. Now I do this on occasion, but again, not very often. So if you're going to press your seams open, you're going to press all of your seams open. Okay? And let me show you a little tip here. I don't think this is in my other video, but if it is, this will be okay. Okay, so to press your seams open, you're just going to set your seam. I really prefer my other mister. Get that seam nice and flat. Okay? And then when you flip it over, it's already pressed to one side. And this is how I prefer to press my seams open. So it's pressed to one side. Oh, that's hot. Okay, so it's pressed to one side already, and then I'm just going to pull the other side open and press it like this. Now again, I seldom press my seams open, but a lot of quilters do this. That's just my starch in a nicer Mr. bottle. Use my little clapper to help flatten that out a little bit more. And you can see how nice and flat that lays. Okay, so if you're going to assemble like a 4-patch, you're just going to start by sewing your pieces together and pressing them open. And then, once you have those sewn together, then you're going to press these open. I'm just going to press these open. So you can see. So in the block, like using the method that I typically do, we've got 2, 4, 5 layers of fabric, and in this one you only have 2, 3, 4 layers of fabric. So it does lay a little bit flatter if you want to take the time to press open your seams. Now, you know, I don't make quilts to really enter in fairs and contests and all. If I did, I might elect to do this, but there's been no issues with my quilter. I've not had any issues when I've done machine quilting. So, but this is one way to get it flatter, and it is flatter because you have fewer layers. Okay, now the next strategy I want to show you is called spinning the seams. So here I've pressed the fabric to the dark side, just like in this block right here. They're all pressed, and you have a little bit of a bump there. But this is called spinning the seams. And all you do is you go in there and you just take out a couple of little stitches right there. Okay? And you're just going to press that way. And then this seam is going to go towards the lighter fabric. So it makes a little square there. And you went from 4 to 5 down to, you went from 5 layers down to 4 layers. So this is a little bit flatter than my original one. Not a whole lot, but it is a little bit flatter. Okay, so that's called spinning the seams, or you just take those couple of stitches out and then press one this way and press one that way. And it does make it flatter if you're willing to do that. Now, when you do this and when you press your seams open, I would recommend that you decrease your stitch length so that you have a smaller stitch. I think that might help that seam be a little bit stronger. Looks kind of neat, doesn't it? And I think the little 4-patch there is so cute. And here it is in another little block that I did. You can see the little 4-patch there. And it does lay nice and flat. But again, I don't typically practice that. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you is how you can reduce the seams in like a pinwheel block. And here you can spin the seams just like you do on the 4 patch. You just have more seams coming together. And again, you could press the seams open on this one. I didn't do a block showing how to press those open, but you can do that. But I wanted to show you how you can spin or pinwheel the seams when you do something like a pinwheel. And this is called spinning or pinwheel, and see, that creates a little pinwheel there. Okay, so all you do is you sew your blocks together. I've pressed them to one side. And then you're going to go in here, right in there, and you're going to loosen that seam. See, you can see how those stitches have been removed, or how I've loosened those. So you're going to press this seam down and that seam up. Okay? And it's going to create this little pinwheel so that you're decreasing the number of fabrics, the layer of fabrics there. Now, you can see that. Now this still does have several layers of fabric. There's 2, 4, there's 6. But if you press them all to one side, you're going to have a couple of more layers. So this does help with that. Now, just a couple of notes. I have heard of people getting a hammer out to hammer these flatter. I'm not sure why they would do that, but they do. But I just want to give you a little word of caution there. If you hammer that vigorously, you're likely to crush and damage some of the fibers in that fabric. Or anyway, that's what I think would happen. So I'm not sure that hammering your fabric is the best idea there. Okay? I've also you can also grade the seam, and let me show you what that means. Okay, so that just means you have 2 pieces of fabric, and it just means you're going to go in and you're going to trim just one of the layers down some to reduce the bulk. And that reduces the fabric there. Now, I don't practice this either. And the reason I don't practice this, and again, this is just my personal opinion, I really feel like since we quilt with 1/4 of an inch, anything smaller, if this were to rip out, you're going to have a much more difficult time trying to repair that. And I certainly don't want my quilts to fall apart, because I really make them and give them with the intention that they're going to be used and washed, hopefully a lot. So there is this called grading or trimming the seam, but I don't recommend, I don't ever use this personally, and I don't take a hammer to my fabric. Now, I have sometimes spun the seam like this, or I have opened it up and spun the seam right there, like that. But my number one go-to for getting flatter seams is simply pressing them really well. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't, share with a friend, and as always, leave a comment. I love to get the comments. I try to respond to each and every one. So until next time, have fun quilting.